Hey there, it's Graciela here. In today's video, we'll be learning how to create dynamic and sequential approvals in Power Automate. So for example, we have this list of projects and we want to send different approvals to different people depending on the department. But we want them to be in a specific order, and the next person cannot approve until the previous person from the previous level has approved. This is really useful, for example, if you have different type of approvals for different type of records and if you have different levels. Or if you have some people that has to do an initial review and only after they have reviewed, the next approval request can be sent. In a previous video, we talked about creating dynamic approvals, but all the approvals were sent to the people or to the group of users at the same time. So in this scenario, what we want to do is to send an individual request to each person, and each person should review the notification and approve it before moving forward to the next step. So for this new setup, for this new type of scenario, we would need a setup table like this, in which we have what's the department, the different approval levels for that department that will also indicate the order in which things will be approved, and then who is going to be the user that is going to approve. So for example, for marketing, we have only two approval levels. So it's going to be this user who is going to review it first. And once this user approves, the next user will receive the approval. Then for finance, we have three different approvers and in this specific order. So for example, Eduardo can only approve once Graciela approves, and Melvin can only approve once Eduardo approves. So in our previous video, we had this list of departments with the approvers, but this is not going to be enough for our scenario. So what we need to do is we need to create a new SharePoint list that kind of replicates what we have in place here. So we are going to call it approval matrix. So we're going to go to the SharePoint site and go ahead and create a new list. And what's important to mention is that we're working this with SharePoint, but this can really work for any other data source that you're using, such as Dataverse or SQL. So the first thing that we want to do is we need to connect this departments list because we also have it connected to the projects table. As a lookup column, we're also going to do that in the approval matrix. That way, the approval matrix and the projects are connected through the departments list. So let's go ahead and create a new column, and then let's select lookup. Here, we're going to call it department, and let's connect it to the department list, and let's hit on save. Then we are going to add a number column, and so we're able to sort it in Power Automate and work with these numbers. So we're going to call it just level. We can also call it approval level for it to be more specific. And finally, we are going to just select who is the user that is going to approve. So for that, let's use a person column and hit on next. And let's call it approver. With this, for example, we can just, for example, copy this and then edit in grid. And let's start filling out the information. The operations department doesn't exist yet in the list, and that's why it didn't take it. But let's call it operations and then save. And let's select our approvers for now. And that's it. This is all the setup that we need. In this case, we are using just one condition, which is the department. But for example, if the approval is going to be by company and department, or by company, department, and team, or something like that, or by category, we can keep adding new columns to indicate the different categories and who are the approvers for each category. But once this setup is ready, we can just go to Power Automate and start creating our workflow. So this is the Power Automate portal. So let's just go ahead and create a new workflow. And we are going to create an automated cloud flow. And our trigger is going to be when a new item is created in SharePoint. And once the flow loads, we can just select our SharePoint site, which is in this case is this one. Then let's create our SharePoint list. Then let's select our SharePoint list. And once the item is created, what we need to do is we need to get who are the approvers of the department that was selected. So for example, in this case, if I select that the project was finance, we need to quote unquote filter this list, find all the approvers under the finance department and send it to whoever is listed. It may be that one person is listed only, or that can be 5 or 2 or 3, we don't know. So we just need to find out n number of approvers that may be added in this list. So for that, we need to go back to Power Automate, and we are going to use the get items action from SharePoint to dynamically get all those approvers. So we're gonna go here to get items. And we are going to select what's the SharePoint site, which in this case is Power GI Demos. And then here in the list name, we need to get the information from the approval matrix. So let's rename this to get approvers list. And we are going to add a new parameter, which is the filter query. And here we need to know that we need to send a filter, or to send like an indication to SharePoint to know which is the department that we want to get the approvers from. So in this case, it's going to be the department. In this case, when we are going to work with OData filters in SharePoint, there are many ways in which we can work these filters. We can either use the title, we can use the ID. If you want to know how to apply different filters to SharePoint lists from Power Automate, you can have a look to our post to our blog on this in our website. But for now, what we care about is the filter lookup columns, because we are doing this department name by a lookup column. So we're gonna use the ID because I think that's safer, but the text column that we show in the list as well could also work, which is in this case the department name. But in our case, let's select the code, let's copy the code and then put it into Power Automate. And in the internal column name, what we need to do is just bring in the column name from SharePoint. In this case, this is the column name that we care about. It's called department. So we're just going to write department and then /ID. And this way, this is going to be recognized. If you want to make sure you're using the right column name, always go to list settings and then open the column that you want to filter on. And here in the URL, you'll find the actual or the exact column name that you want to use in this filtering. If for some reason, when you created the SharePoint list, you had certain column name and then you change it, the name that will show here will usually be the name that you created the column in first place. So we always need to make sure that we're using the right column name, and you can always find it here in this URL. And then we're just gonna pass some single quotes here for the ID and just pass the department ID here. That automatically comes from the trigger, because remember that our project request had the department. So from the trigger, we can know what's the department that this is related to. And with this, we are just querying the approval matrix table for this specific department, so it can return to us the list of approvers, which in this case, assuming, for example, it's finance, it's going to be 3 users. So let's hit on save. And to send these sequential approvals, we can do it in 2 different ways. The first way that we can use is finding the approval action. For example, start and wait for an approval. And there is already a sequential approval available here, which is the one that we have here. So this is, I would say, probably the easier option, because pretty much Power Automate handles everything for us, and it can let us know if it was approved, if it was rejected, and all of that. So this, I think this is really useful, but it also has the downside that we cannot do anything in between approvals unless we create a second workflow that is reading the different stages in which it is getting approved. But we're gonna see in the next approach how we can do things in between each approval, so we can see the 2 ways of achieving these dynamic and sequential approvals. So in this case, we are going to be using this action, start and wait for an approval. Make sure you select sequential approval. And I just realized that my Power Automate was in Spanish, so I just switched it. And again, let's select the sequential approval. And here it's going to ask us some information like what's the title we want to add, what are the different approval steps. So in this case, for example, we're just going to add approval for, and then just send the title of the project, which is going to be in the title from the trigger. So let's select it there. And then in the details, we can add as many information. For now, we're just gonna write a quick message, please check and approve project. And we can also add a link to the item. Since we're working with SharePoint, we can just bring the link that SharePoint creates that is called link to item. And in the description, let's call it project details. And now comes the dynamic part, which is in this section that is called approval steps. So we can just click on add new item, and we are just going to, for now, add an email here so we can see the code or the structure that we need. And let's add someone else. For example, here, let's add this other user. And this is the structure that Power Automate will expect to be able to send the dynamic approval to the user. So let's switch to input entire array. So once we click here, we see the format in which Power Automate is expecting. This is an array that is expecting, and each array will have an object with a quote-unquote column that is going to be called assigned to, and then the actual email that will receive this approval request. So in this case, you can see that these are equal except for the email that we are including. So in this case, let's open a notepad and paste this here. And pretty much what we need to do is to convert the results from SharePoint into this structure that Power Automate, the approval action is waiting. So what we're gonna do is use the select action. So in this case, let's look for the select action. With the select action, we can do many things. One of them is to convert the a structure, a table or a JSON structure into a new JSON structure. So we can give it what's the previous name that it had, what's the value we want, and what's the new name that we want. So in this case, we want this information to come from the approvers list. And you can see that Power Automate automatically recognizes that here we need to pass a list of values. And in this case, it's going to be the list of approvers that come from our previous step. So we add it here. And now in map, what we are going to do is just copy exactly the same name that Power Automate needs, which in this case is assigned to, and paste it here. So the map on the left section, we need to put what's the column name that we need. And on the right side, we are going to bring what's the email that we want to connect these to. In this case, we are going to connect it to the approver email. So let's select approver email. And with this, pretty much we are converting whatever result SharePoint will give us in this result that Power Automate needs in the approval step. So let's go back to our approval step. We can call this select approvers. And then here, let's click again on this icon to switch to input the entire array, remove whatever Power Automate put, and then click on the dynamic content and just pass the result from the select approvers. And with this, we have enough for the approvals to be sent to the specific users. The only thing that we're missing for now that I forgot is that we need to sort this by the column that we defined to have the order, which in this case is the approval level. So in this case, we need to write approval level, and we're going to order in ascending mode because we need the number 1 to be sent first, 2, then later 3 and 4, and so on. So let's click on save. And now what will happen is that when we create a project, we're going to get who are the approvers of the department that was linked to the project. We're going to convert this list of approvers into the format that Power Automate is expecting. And finally, we're going to send this approval to this list of users. So now we are ready to start a new project and see the approval happen. So we're going to do it with finance first. And let's here click on test for the workflow to wait for us to submit a new item. and then let's hit on save. And I made a mistake here. I wrote ask for ascending with the A in uppercase. So we need to change that to everything has to be lowercase. So it has to be this way. So let's hit on save. And we're going to test it again with the same record that failed, just to make sure this new change works. So let's go ahead and resubmit. Okay, now this time it worked. And we see how Power Automate brought the whole list of approvers, which in this case we have 3 of them. If I click here on the row outputs, we're going to see that we have 3 different approvers for the finance department. We have one here, which is ID number 5, ID number 4, and ID number 3. If we go to our SharePoint list and we see the approval matrix, we're going to see those are the 3 IDs that this department has listed. So here we are from 3 to 5. Now, if we go to our workflow, if we see select approvers, now you see how this output looks exactly the same as the one that we had here, in which we had an array and then kind of a JSON object with the assigned to column. And now it should start sending each of the requests that we set up this approval for. So in this case, the first user that will receive it is this Power GI user. So you can see it's being received and this user can start approving. You can see that is only received by this user. I haven't received any approval. It's only this user who is receiving the first one. So in this case, let's click on approve. Now we can click on submit. And now that the first user approved, I have also received it in my queue. You can see it's here. And you can see how it correctly recognized that I was the requester. Then for the step 1, we had the Power BI user. For the step 2, we're pending on my response. And for the step 3, it would go to Edwin. So if we do the same thing, for example, for a marketing department, a similar thing will happen. I will be the first person to receive, and then it will go to the second user. So let's add one example for marketing. And I should receive this notification in a few minutes. So in this case, you can see how we are actually doing this dynamic approval, which is a pretty similar concept to what we reviewed last time. But this time we're sending it in a specific order, depending on the specific requirements for each different department. And this is the first way in which we can perform this dynamic setup. And now we just need to wait for the next approval to happen. And since it's going to be a different department, it's going to be just 2 people, but it's going to be a similar setup from what we have here. It will go to the list, get who are the marketing approvers, grab the marketing approvers, and send it to that list. So I already received the notification in my Teams. So let's see if we can refresh this view. Now you can see we have the example for marketing. In this case, we have only 2 users. If I open it, I'm going to see that Graciela should be the first step and then the Power GI user. And this is how we can work with these dynamic approvals using this out-of-the-box action from Power Automate. So what happens, for example, if we want to add a log or if we want to save the comment somewhere or if we want to do things in the middle of the request. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I will just delete these 2 steps. And this is going to stay because we always need the approvers list with the department and ordered by approval level. So the next thing that we can do is to send an individual request to each user. So in this case, you see that we can see all the list of users that at some point will receive the notification and will approve or reject, and everything is handled in a single request. But the other approach is to send individual requests to each user. And for that, let's just add the very same action, the start and wait for approval, which is here. And we are going to select that we want the approve reject. texts, and that's going to enable certain options. What we will do is just copy the same text from the other approval. So let's copy the title and then just connect it to the title of the project, which is here in the trigger. In the details, we're going to write the same text here, and in the item link, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to connect it to the link that SharePoint creates for us and write project details here. And in the assigned to, it's going to be pretty similar to what we did previously, but instead of sending the whole list of approvers at once, what we want to do is just send one approver at a time. So let's click here to enable dynamic content, and then let's click on the dynamic content icon. And here we are going to look for the approver email column. So once we select this, you're going to notice how Power Automate is going to grab our approval action inside for each action. So that means that for each approver that it finds, is going to send an individual request. And with this, for example, we can create a new action in SharePoint that is create item, where we can create logs or where we can send notifications. For example, we can send an email and just let the user know that the first approval has happened. So we can send this to the creator. And we can write, for example, approval level, and then bring the approval number that we know that is here in the approvers list. And then we can write a dash and just give the outcome of the result, which is, in this case, for example, it's going to be approved or rejected. And we can send an email stage and then approval level again, complete. So I would say that this is something good of this approach, is that we can do things in between approvals, like notifying someone or adding logs or whatever thing we want to do in between approvals inside the workflow. It's possible to do it with this way. On the other way, everything is sent in the same approval request, so you cannot do things in between unless we create a separate workflow that handles each of those actions that we want to do, in which we are listening to each of the approvals that are happening. So those are just different approach that serve different purposes. So in this case, we can do it this way. What will happen here is that the approval will be sent to each individual user, and once the user approves, then we're going to send a notification. Let's just add who is the approver here. And then we can just click on save. And let's start a new project. We're going to start with marketing this time. And let's just wait for the workflow to be triggered. And again, in this new scenario, it will be a little bit different. We're not going to be receiving the whole list. We're just going to be receiving that we are the approvers for this stage, and then the next user will get a different approval. So let's open Teams for this user. And once we have all this logic, we can do whatever we need. For example, if we want to a step to update the project status, we can run an update item action here, import automate to update the project status, or whatever we want to do. Something really important that we also need to do when there is a rejection, we need to check if it was approved or rejected. And if it was rejected, we need to be able to flag this project for it not to be sent to the next approver. So that's something that we would need to add here, but that depends a lot on the process. If we want to send notifications to the next users, if we want to send the approvals to the next person. So that depends a lot on the process. But what we would do here is just a regular check on what was the outcome. So for example, here we just call the outcome from the workflow and just check if it was approved or not, and then action based on that to cancel the workflow or not. So that's one thing that we could add as well if we want to do something here. But I already received the request. Let's refresh here the page. And you can see it's here. It was sent to the first user. And here, for example, I can just click approve level 1. And we're gonna see that an email will be sent to the user because we added some steps to send an email to the user. So if I go to my email, I should have something there that lets me know that the workflow was approved. So let's see. Well, it seems like the email failed, so we're gonna see what happened in a minute. But I already received the second approval level here on the second user, which is the one that you can see here. So let's do approval 2 and then hit on approve, and that will show us what was the error with the email. We're gonna see that in a moment. Okay, so it seems like my connection was not working and that's why it failed. So let's try to refresh it. And let's hit on save and start a new approval so we can see the email. And you can see here, for example, that we had these two approvals. In the first approach that we reviewed, it was a single request with different users. And this second one, there is one request for each user. And you can see that we have two requests and both of them say approved. We could have added here something like the level or something so we can see which level each is which, but they are in order. So this is level 1 and this is level 2. We see that the other one that I just resubmitted was here, so I should receive it. It's already here as well, so I can approve it. And we're gonna receive the email hopefully after that because the connection was just refreshed. And yes, this time I actually got the email. You can see it here. We have approval level 1 approved, and then we have stage 1 completed by my name because I was the person who approved. Then here we have the second user. We're also going to approve it. And let's hit on approve. And I should receive a second email letting me know that the second approval also happened. And I also got my email here. So you can see level 2 is approved and it tells me who was the user that approved this request. And this is how we can set up some simple dynamic and sequential approvals in Power Automate using two different approaches. The first one is based on sending one single request using this structure, and the second one is based on sending one single request for each user and adding the ability to do things in between each request. And it's really important to remember that we need something like an approval matrix to help Power Automate know who is the approver for each level. And in that case, we are avoiding hard coding names or hard coding approval levels in Power Automate, and we do it dynamically from an external table that any user or the admin users or the approved users can come here and update. So because, for example, if I come and add a new approver for marketing, the next time the flow runs, the new marketing approver will automatically add it to the list of approvers. Or if I change this user to someone else, the next time it runs, it will also change. Same if I delete this row, the next time it runs, it will run only for two users and in the specific order that we have here. So it's really important to always have an approval matrix because it will be better for long-term maintenance of the process, and that way it's going to be dynamic and the end users won't depend on us, the developer, in changing the Power Automate workflow every time this matrix requires a change. And this is kind of a simple example because there are only a few departments, but this concept itself can be applied to more complex scenarios and more complex business cases, and it can be used in Power Automate to create these sequential and dynamic approvals, and ends up being really useful for many use cases. And I hope that this was useful for you. See you next time.